Good break. Everybody caffeinated? Ready for some amazing insights? I hope so. We have a great group gathered here today. My name is Brad Olson. I'm the Deputy Bureau Chief at the Wall Street Journal for Technology. And I'd love to actually allow these panelists to introduce themselves. And I've asked each of them to think, kind of have a response ready for like what I call like a starter question. I think one of my favorite things to do when we talk to people in AI or in the AI race is to ask a little bit about what's a wow moment they've experienced recently, or even a moment where they might have been disappointed by the performance of an AI model or whatever their expectations were. And so I'd love to have everyone introduce themselves, and if you could answer either side of that question when you introduce yourself, if you had a recent wow moment or even some way in which maybe what you thought would work with AI didn't live up to expectations. You want to start?
Oh, sure. So, hi, everybody. I want to thank the sponsors for inviting me. My name is Jeff Wecker. I run engineering for an investment management firm called 2 Sigma. Before that, I was a partner and the first chief data officer for Goldman Sachs. And before that, I was at Bridgewater Associates and renovated their investment engine. I can keep going, but I'm an old guy, so there's a lot of before that's as well. So we'll stop there. Do you want my answer for your question?
I think I'd love to. It's a nice conversation starter.
So amazing things. I'm embarrassed to say that a few years back I tried to use one of the LLMs for parenting advice, and it was terrible. Just absolutely terrible. And I've tried it more recently, and I actually got some pretty impressive results, which I don't know if the LLMs have gotten better or I got a lot worse, but very impressive anyway.
Very cool.
Hi, I'm Jen Allam. I'm one of the co-heads for one of the AI teams at DE Shaw. And something that I found delightful recently, perhaps not revelatory in usage, is having AI be an executive coach. I hope I'm not alone in this room as being the only one with growth areas. But it's delightful. If there's something you're working on, DE Shaw is very known for precise communication. And so it's an area I want to get better at. And it's both wonderful for timely, actionable insight, qualitative and quantitative, as long as you give it the right context. And I'm getting a ton of value out of it. So I love that about it at the moment.
Wonderful.
Okay, go next. My name is Ali Nazari. I run deep learning research team at Susquehanna. Before that, I had my own startup. It was actually a deep learning hedge fund as well. And before that, I was an information theorist. I guess it's so easy to be excited about entire, evolution of AI and, machine learning AI and then, agentic systems in the past few years, particularly last year. What I want to take is actually disappointment. A few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I was trying to work on a research problem. I asked one of these frontier AI models to help me think about it, and it came up with something super exciting, super amazing. Came up with about 30 different plausible solutions. Each of those ideas, if I wanted to do myself, it would probably take me months, if not quarters. Then I realized actually the hardest part didn't disappear, it just moved. Now I found myself, instead of just trying to come up with idea to generate idea, I was trying to figure out which of these ideas that gave me worth my time. And that's the reminder to me that, all of these bottlenecks, all of these challenges, they don't just disappear, they just move.
Yeah, my name is Li Deng. I spent about 18 years at Microsoft, and then I joined Citadel, and now currently with Vedic Investment. So before Microsoft, I was academia. At that time, I started doing neural network, right? It just never worked, right? And even the first 10 years at Microsoft, I turned everything, all my machine learning tools into Bayesian network, deep generative model, but not that by neural network, but by the standard statistical method. and the result is just slow. I work on voice recognition and translation, spoken language processing. And the wow moment for me, it started in 2010 when I first got the opportunity to look at a neural network. Actually, it was inspired by Jeffrey Hinton. Later on, he got Nobel Prize. And the first 2 or 3 experiments that we tried already just shoot down the error rate by about 1/3 to 1/2. And I immediately say, throw out all other tools, just embrace neural network, deep neural network. We built at that time, up to about 13, 14 layers in as early as 2010. I was reminiscing with Jennifer earlier today. At that time, most of the people at Microsoft wouldn't believe that it's what. That was my big wow point. And then the second wow moment for me was when ChatGPT came out. The first time I was trying ChatGPT about 3 years ago, I just thought that something must go wrong. That's exactly what many people said during my speech recognition time at Microsoft. They said, oh, you probably mixed training and test data, right? Now for ChatGPT, we actually were able to use that, as the product. So nothing could be wrong, right? Because it's real testing. And then it took me, I have to get back. At that time, I was already in Wall Street there. I have to get my previous a team member who used to report to me. He actually at the time was leading the reasoning team at Google. And he had to explain to me that there are certain kind of decoding technique that is different than the traditional machine learning. And then that made me immediately realize that, wow, that's real. But now, when Agentic AI came out, there was small amount of wow moment. It actually not just do pattern recognition, pattern matching, the kind of traditional machine learning task, but it actually can do the reasoning, but also it can also kind of put things together. It actually does knowledge kind of management, and that part really wowed me. Okay, I'll stop right here.
I think we've all had that experience where there are a series of those moments for all of us. One of the things that I wanted to ask, because I imagine many of you are here today to hear from people in finance and Wall Street. I'm interested in maybe what the differences might be. A lot of people might be familiar with AI in the context of software engineering and the capabilities that are possible, to accelerate software engineering. But I wonder if any of you could address the adoption curve within finance. What are different things that are in consideration, as opposed to in a technology institution or organization? What are different kinds of things that are being looked at or that are important?
So I'm happy to start and then turn over to my colleagues. We are mostly at Two Sigma, a technology firm that invests. Of the 1,800 employees that we have, about just under 1,000 are in engineering, another 400 or 500 are modeling, and then all the rest of the firm, the rest do everything else. And so for most engineers, you give them a new tool, and it's hard to believe. You think about Claude being available in February of 25. We started using it within a few weeks and went GA within a month, 6 weeks. And so engineers, you see different rates of adoption, but you see engineers ready to take another tool in the toolbox, look at it, and say, oh, I know how to build with it, and start going. What's exciting to me is the potential to have everybody at the firm think of themselves as AI first. And there are different rates of adoption, and it's becoming very clear as we look at various metrics that those that adopt sooner, faster, are clearly becoming much more productive by a lot of different measures that you look at, code branches or work, things they've written, things they publish. And so our goal is to try to figure out what is the right set of tools, what's the right partnership for everyone at the firm to be AI first. And while a lot of our focus at the firm is on the investment pipeline, of course, there's every single other workflow at the firm that can lend itself to that. We're seeing people now that have no technical backgrounds starting to use Claude in auto mode or one of our in-house workbenches in auto mode, and it's really impressive to see people experiment. And I think as a result, the rate of innovation now is as high as it's been in recent memory.
Fascinating.
I guess I can add something to that. I mean, the adoption is real. I mean, in quantitative finance, Susquehanna particularly, all engineers, researchers are using AI tools. I mean, as Jeff mentioned, there are different rate. Some people use it more, some people use it less. But I mean, one thing that is different in finance compared to a software company is that the cost of mistakes. So in a software company, if your AI model make a mistake, I mean, hopefully you have unit tests, you're going to figure it out, you're going to fix it, and you move on. In finance and many other fields, it can cost a lot. It can cost money. It can be kind of even a lot of other dangerous things to the entire kind of society in some cases. So we need to be, in general, quantitative finance has been early adopter of many things, whether it's statistical learning, whether it's machine learning, different type of thing. But when it comes to agentic system, I mean, we need to be careful. And then, I would say that trust is something that needs to be gained. There are some things that I definitely use AI all the time for, and there are some stuff that I prefer, human be part of it. And then the other thing is that I think trust needs to be regained. Model change, data change, market shift, everything happens, and then something that you were trusting 6 months ago might not be trustable right now. So I think it's all about the mistake and then the trust of the model.
Jen, maybe one thing I'd like to get your insight on is how do you encourage teams to experiment with and evaluate kind of new AI tools before deciding what to scale?
I think an underappreciated quality of firms like ours is that in many ways they operate like innovation businesses. There's a relentless need to be able to innovate on what you do. And that means the DNA is there for experimentation and history is there for experimentation. D. Shaw is perhaps known as one of the original kind of quant funds. Of course, AI is in the DNA. And as a federated business with multiple strategies, we're able to unlock experiments across the organization and allow for a bottoms-up finding of where the value is. So we think about the rate of learning and the rate of discovery we have, let lots of experiments run, be maximalist in the policy, build and buy and everything in between, and then see what catches fire. And then think about where we scale that and for who and how. So it's a continuous process that is very much part of the DNA and that this new advent of AI is accelerating.
Leah, I'd love to know in your organization, how are you balancing the experimentation versus cost problem that a lot of companies are facing right now?
Oh, yeah, very much so. So compared with the high-tech world, the quant world has a similar kind of workflow. Right? You extract features, that's what we call alpha, and then you have a model to do the forecast, just like prediction, pattern recognition. And then you do experimentation and evaluation. We call the back testing, whereas in high-tech world, you call the validation. And then you go on testing in the high-tech world. Now we call the paper trading or online trading. Now the key issue here is that the signals are extremely noisy. The input signal is noisy, the output signal is even more noisy. So one of the reasons I actually decided to move from Microsoft to the Wall Street is I tried to understand exactly. I thought that the problem is going to be unsupervised because the signal is so noisy, you might as well just forget about the signal. It turned out that it's a mix. If you're purely using unsupervised learning, you're not going to go anywhere. And then you do have a little bit of supervision, but it's extremely noisy. The first time I look at the data, finance data, that's after residualizing all the returns, I thought that I got the wrong data. Right? It's just random noise or random walk, almost everything there. But it turned out that the signal is right. You want to extract very tiny bit of signal from there. So we need to use a special kind of technique, especially in the experimentation and evaluation side. So earlier on, we heard Google DeepMind, Oriol Vignal, he went through a recursive, a self-improvement pipeline, all these pipelines, we went through them all. But we emphasized a lot more on the evaluation side. And then because evaluation output is very, very noisy, you don't even know what will be the right signal to predict. And then how do you provide the right feedback in order to further improve your features, etc. So we put a lot of effort on that. But so the key over the past few years of the work upon AI, it's not as much as making the model bigger. You expect to have emergent capability coming out, just like large language model. We try quite a bit, but we don't know how far we are going to do. But my hunch is that we need to go much more further away because of the nature of the noisy input-output, right? So we actually gave up on that part. And then the key focus would be, to your point, how to make the entire system to form a right self-loop in such a way that, agentic method is really the key that minimize, all the human effort, engineers' effort, alpha engineers' effort to put them in place. And that's the kind of focus we have been put on in my current work.
But if I could just add something to the point about cost, because I think it's going to play a growing role going forward. If I think about historically our business, when it was founded 26 years ago, most of our modeling was fairly low dimensionality, statistical models, and then sort of low to mid machine learning models, and we moved from that to ensembles, and we started to train our own transformers. Then you had, with GPT 3.5 coming out, you finally had the ability to use publicly available models, because the frontier firms gave you such a head start in training that reduced the cost of doing that. I think what we're seeing now with the advent of agent-centric workflows, we are on the eve of the potentially an explosive use of compute demand that we have to be pretty careful of. Because if we have, if I use the 2 Sigma example, we have 1,800 employees today, but if behind those 1,800 employees there are 250,000 agents doing operation, all making their own compute demand, then we really have to think about the implications, return on investment of that. Now, to be fair, when you're seeking alpha, you dig a lot of dry wells. There's no doubt about it. But at some point, you have to look at the maturity model of the investments that you're making in identifying alpha opportunities, and then think through whether or not you're failing fast enough to protect against the massive investment demand that you have in compute.
Interesting. I think maybe to switch gears there, because you mentioned the personnel, one thing that is a great question for all organizations is like how the AI age has changed kind of the search for talent, the recruiting process. And would love to hear from everyone about that and kind of how different things that you look for has changed in this age and in this era. Obviously, most people are looking for people of talent, but how do you find them? How do you sense that someone has a experimentation capability and maybe the skills to make a lot out of those things?
Mm-hmm.
I think, yeah.
We think about AI as an opportunity creator, something that is helping us innovate and drive higher quality work. And so we are deep in finding great talent continuously. And DE Shaw, I think, is known in some ways for hiring particular types of people and looks for curiosity, lifelong learners, critical thinkers, systems thinkers. These are qualities that are becoming even more important now. And when people commit to the firm and have decades-long careers, as is common, then actually you're looking for a degree of adaptability, that they will have multiple careers within the organization. And so as I'm building out a team and I'm thinking about how to hire, it's kind of emphasizing those qualities more alongside functional expertise, and then building on that, thinking ahead to what's the next role and the role after that they'll be doing with us.
Yeah, I completely agree. And then I think some of the qualities still is going to stay the same. So we want smart people like that who are curious, who are asking like right question, who can work independently. And then these qualities matters actually maybe more than before. One thing that changed though is that the interview process, the type of thing that we were questioning people before, was built for a time that implementation was the hardest part. Now that AI does good amount of implementation for us, the type of things that we care about change as well. We need to make sure that people can adapt to this kind of thing, they can use the tools properly, and they can detect if like an AI system, confidently wrong about something, they should be able to detect it. One thing I'm actually wondering is that the next generation, how they're gonna develop judgment. Like if you think about judgment, traditionally what we were doing is that we try something, we make a mistake, we learn from that mistake, and then how judgment is being developed. Now that AI does most of the experimentation for us, the question is that how that judgment is going to be developed. And this is the question, I guess, for next generation.
Yeah. Yeah, so in my firm, for example, maybe just 2 years ago, right? Most of the team members are, PhDs from, Ivy League, from mathematics, from physics, some computer science, da, da, da. Nowadays, I think 2/3 of them are no longer with the firm. Before, sometime every now and then we get the CV, coming from, universities. They don't even have PhD. We don't even look at the CV to say, sorry, we don't hire, non-PhD. But now we have maybe more than half of the people who are not, who are not even PhD. For the intern, we actually enjoy undergraduate students, senior undergraduate students to come. They actually can do agentic work, probably faster than full-time the people there. So all the talents actually profile change quite a bit just over the past 2 years.
Yeah, if I could just clear something up, we are hiring. We are hiring, and but I do think what people are doing is very different. We've eliminated coding tests, of course, because we'd be testing LLMs and not people. Yeah. But I do think that the kind of scientist, the kind of computer scientist, the kind of engineer is going to be even more important to us going forward. Their ability to take a problem, decompose problems clearly into components. Can they actually prompt to get the kinds of outcomes that we really want to see? Can they design agents that are able to use judgment and really help to accelerate either the generation of features, the generation of models, the generation of order placement or portfolio construction models. That's going to be critical. And so we're looking for people that have the cognitive depth to be inquisitive and learn our business, and then bring to bear the skills that they've learned in their various scientific backgrounds to apply them to deconstruct the ideas that they may have about what's possible in the future, and then deliver outcomes.
Well, I think it's certainly good for everyone in this room to know that people are hiring, that it's possible out there. I think another thing that I'd like to ask that I think is relevant to the talent question, for those of you who are willing to answer, is if you were going to design a quant firm from scratch, what might be different about it now, in this age? What might you do differently than maybe the existing systems and infrastructure that you've seen?
So I think one thing that I would do is that I think quantitative trading has two parts. One is the research side, the other one is trading. One side is creating the knowledge, the other side is using the knowledge. So, if I want to build a, new quantitative trading firms, I basically focus more and more on the research side. And there are a couple of things I'm going to do on research side. The first thing I'm going to do, make sure that every single experiment, the failures, the successes, everything that has been done is become part of a knowledge of the organization. I guess there are things that, especially the failures, many people put them in their mind, and then when they leave the company, the knowledge goes with them. The second thing I would do is that making sure that, the evaluation become part of the research loop. not something that we add at the end. And the third thing I'm going to do essentially is going to be making sure that researchers, the human research and AI researchers, go to the same kind of research process. They're going to be evaluated the same way, regardless of whether is AI generated or human generated. And then the knowledge we're going to learn from both of them is going to go to the knowledge of the entire organization. I look at research as not a collection of tasks. It's a process of continuous learning. And I think that's the big distinction.
While we build a fair amount at DSure, we also partner widely with companies outside and like to be a good partner in terms of collaboration, especially when you think about kind of enterprise readiness for what it takes to be able to deliver a product in a regulated space where we care about security and care about our IP deeply. And when we look at products, I think to Ali's point about the kind of know-how the organizations already have, both technically and knowledge-wise, I think there is an opportunity for even sharper thinking about the value proposition of new products in this space, about what they would be, how they would be additive to companies like these.
Well, I have a bit of a wild card question. I want to see if people are up for answering. But I think I'd love to hear what so many people think about this question. If you're not up for answering, we can go to another one. But I'd love to know if anyone wants to weigh in, what is one widely held belief about AI that you think is wrong?
I think the idea that you need fewer people. Certainly there are roles and jobs that are not going to exist in the future. But the idea that you don't need technologists, scientists, mathematicians in a world where more systemic decision support is going to be the future, I think it will turn out to be false. Now, I believe what will happen as a result is a whole host of new roles are going to be generated to take up the changes that are going on in the workforce. But I do believe that one of the ideas that are being advocated is that there won't be opportunities for people in the future. It just doesn't make a lot of sense. It hasn't been true with any other major invention over human history. The world's changed, the markets grow, and the opportunity for more people to make an impact continues to grow.
Does anyone else want to try that one?
I guess I can.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So we heard earlier several talks in robotics and also in foundational model, right? People still talk about, one wave of scaling and the second wave of scaling. There could be third wave of scaling. So I personally feel that maybe it could, I think for robotics, could be true. Whereas in finance, I just don't believe this is going to be correct. We have done a lot of work over the past few years trying to scale. We never reached the point where we have the emergent capability come up. But I think in finance, the most important part really is the systematic way of looking at the full system, right? Especially the integration between different components of machine learning, especially at the output side, evaluation and the feedback. Because feedback in the financial market is a very, very different type of problem than in the high tech. And that part of design probably carries a lot more weight in the agentic area. And I remember when I moved from Microsoft to Citadel 7 years ago, my big boss, very wealthy, billionaire, right? He actually first personally told me that we hire you. We know that you disrupt the speech recognition. You practically solve a speech recognition problem, and then you do natural. We hire you. We don't expect you to bring that kind of expertise to Citadel, because if you build a system for translation system, for recognition system, it may work today, and then more likely next week you don't have to adapt. Right? Maybe when you wait for 3 or 4 years, when you have different president, for example, the language change, right? And then you have one president, different policy, different, and then language model change that will affect speech recognition. At that time, you have to adapt. And maybe for voice, you have to wait maybe a few years when coding standard changes. Maybe whatever system that you trained before may break. If you want to bring that kind of system into financial world, you're going to fail, because in financial market, every time you put order into the market, people react that differently. It changes the environment much more so than the high-tech world. I think this is, the drastic difference between, different worlds. So I think a traditional way of thinking in high-tech world of scaling and then doing, all sorts of things that you heard here, maybe most of them may not be applicable to us.
Well, thank you all for joining, and thank you for hearing and listening to us. I think that concludes our panel today. And yeah, thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you. Thank you.